Do right, do me right, yeah. I need love, yeah. Knocking down my do right in the morning, do right in the evening, do right in the morning, do right.
Thank you so much. Francis Ford Coppola said something very interesting, which I discovered recently, listening to a podcast. He said, "The things that get you fired when you're young get you awards when you get older." So it really feels like I'm getting an award being here today, talking to you about something I've made that I'm very passionate about, and I'm very grateful that I was invited here. So thank you again. It's about 2:15 in the morning Montreal time, so of course it's the best time to do a presentation. I hope I'll be coherent. So let's get started. The magazine we make is the tagline is observing the things that matter. So I think the key word here is observing. We're not trying to answer all the questions. We're not trying to predict the future. We're trying to observe a certain amount of things going on in the world, some patterns that are shaping our society. And I think of the magazine really as sort of an X-ray of the present that might give us a glimpse of the future. And it's in this way, it's kind of a transformative kind of effort of all the pieces we're trying to pull together in the magazine. So we look at transitions, and it's the world is always in transition, but it seems like now is a particularly fertile period for large-scale transitions. Some have called it the global weirding, as a reference to global warming and all the things that are just happening in the world. So we cover a number of topics. So it's definitely not a ski magazine. Often some magazines look at a certain thing in many ways. We look at many things in a certain way. I think it's a great way. It's my co-editor Patrick who came up with this way of thinking about it. We kind of look at a number of things, but there's a line, there's a red line that basically we're trying to attach a number of things together. The magazine has been compared to, we've been very flattered with the kinds of comparison that we've had, Monocle, Wired, Believer. It's been very interesting to be compared with these very interesting magazines, even though our magazine is very different in the sense that we've only made 2 issues so far, and it basically comes out when one is ready, whenever that might happen. So it's pretty different for a magazine. One reason why some people tell us, before they have one in their hands, they say, "Oh, well, it's not a magazine; it's a book," and it definitely has the scope of a book, but I still prefer to call it a magazine because of that kind of Thinkstyle reference. There's a lot of lifestyle. I mean, lifestyle magazines, they're just everywhere. Thinkstyle is something that I think, for a magazine and the kind of thinking that we're trying to put in the magazine, I think it's still better to call it a magazine just because of the imagery and the kind of craft that we're trying to put in the art direction as well. I think the School of Life, for instance, that just opened in Melbourne, I think it's another example of Thinkstyle, right? It's thinking but done well in a way that's that's just nice and nice and approachable. So the magazine is made in Montreal mostly. We both editors we live in Montreal. It's distributed from Berlin. It's printed in Barcelona, and our creative director lives in Durban, which is a tiny community in the south of France. So it's a very international kind of magazine. Our collaborators are from all over the world. There's just a small example here of where we've been sourcing our collaboration in the magazine. So it comes from everywhere, and we really appreciate this idea of having perspective that comes from every country. We'd like to have, we're very conscious about, gender mix, or do we have someone from Africa? We're trying to get out of just our own little perspective in Montreal, and it's also one of the reasons why we never really wanted this magazine to be a Canadian or a Montreal-based magazine. We wanted it to be international by design. So we've shipped it so far to about more than 45 countries. It's great to learn about people who just come to you and say, hey, I've read your magazine and I discovered that. So we've been blessed as well with some incredible reviews by some people that are really credible. Jeremy is like he's like the Robert Parker of magazine, if you will, and he said some stuff that was very nice, and it was really a test. That when you're doing something, especially when you're doing something that relates to your thinking, you have a lot of skin in the game, because if the ideas are not right and people think that I don't know, you're an imposter, or your thinking is not valid, you have potentially a moral collapse in front of you. So I was really happy that you don't improvise yourself an editor. We did, and we didn't really know what would come out of it, and we've been very blessed to have these kinds of comments on our magazine. So Patrick is my co-editor. He's an extremely smart guy that I was really fortunate to meet back in 2008, and we basically make the magazine together. There's Jennifer as well. Jennifer is a young woman that I've hired as a managing editor. There's in every making or doing story, there's always someone who doesn't collect the award, who's with their energy and their passion make a difference. And without Jennifer, I would have abandoned many times, but she would just come in, and with her passion and her energy, it was just contagious. So she's been really instrumental in making the magazine as well a reality. So why did I become a magazine publisher? Basically, I have to trace the origin of this magazine back to 2001. I'm by trade a lawyer. I was a banking attorney, and I pivoted towards consulting. So 2001, I was basically trucking along, trying to build my career and trying to be good at what I was doing, and then, of course, 9/11 came, and it was really my first large-scale realization of the concept of fragility. And I think we all have probably a different relationship with 9/11 in terms of how it spoke to us. And that really crystallized an idea, seeded an idea within me about fragility. And I started questioning a little bit what I was doing. At about the same time, there was the company Enron collapsed. Enron was a $100 billion company, 20,000 employees, a very big company. We tend to forget a little bit the role of Enron in the in what would come next in 2008. Basically, Enron was a giant fraud at a very large scale, and it was very intertwined as well with power in Washington. And I started. I was trying to create value for organizations as a consultant. I was a cog in the wheel. I was just one of the players trying to work for organizations, really trying to do, thinking it was about something. We were doing, we're trying to create shareholder value. We're trying to do all these things. Enron really started triggering some questions, there's a concept that I really like. It's VUCA, and I think it's this year, 2001, 2002, really got me acquainted with this concept, and I started understanding and realizing that our world is really chaotic and uncertain, and these ideas were starting to grow within me. Asymmetry, for instance, if you go back to 9/11, the entire cost of planning and executing the attacks cost $500,000. The response so far has cost $3.3 trillion. So when we think about a world that's asymmetric, it's a great example. And these things have been a preoccupation. So 2008, we learned some new concepts like too big to fail. And for me, it was further experimentation in fragility. And I started really being, I was with like everyone else, I was just looking at the companies falling, the games that were played, and I started understanding, and I think we all did, how the financial system was interconnected. So it's been something very important for me at that moment. I also joined in 2008 a co-working space that Patrick, my co-editor, had founded, and I thought we were smart in corporations. I was surrounded. We thought that and then I get into this co-working space and I see all these young guys, hyper-connected, super smart. They have a very mature relationship with money. They collaborate, and I was just fascinated, and it's been a key moment as well. So lots of things happened at that moment. So David Harvey said something very interesting about the way in which we handle a crisis tells you something about the crisis to come, and I think it's part of some of the thinking that we're trying to bring in the magazine. In 2011, I was working for a company that had very questionable ethics, and I was, still involved in helping corporations succeed. I was getting closer to the top, and then I started asking myself the question of, if you see fraud and you don't yell fraud, then you become fraud. And I'm not implying that there was fraud at that company, but the kind of ethic that was practiced in this organization, I could not relate to. And then I started to have all these questions about, can I participate in that, and what's next for me? I got the call of citizenship, if you will, and at the same time I was going to become a father for the first time, and it really also does change your outlook, obviously. But in my mind, I was asking myself, what kind of value system am I going to install as an operating system within my daughter who was about to come to this world? And did I want to raise her as a consumer or a citizen? And I started, really having some questions. At the same time, there was the Occupy movement, 2010, 2011, and I'm not a protester. Like I don't go to the street and riot. I barely even camp. So I don't do these things. But I thought that I started asking myself, what can I do that would be in line with some of the thinking that's happening right now in terms of this like universal alienation that seems to be going on, and maybe there's something I can do there. And also I was suffering from digital fatigue. Those line up in front of the Apple store to buy the next phone, and everyone were, now the heads of state were on Twitter, and everyone were talking about technology. I was really a bit tired of that. And so I wanted to move from the business pages to the op-ed pages, basically, and I started thinking about potentially making a magazine. I was having discussions with my co-editor as well about, this idea of post-digital, which Russell Davies was, discussing at the time. And I thought, now that technology is like electricity, what now? And you had the maker movement and you had all these good things, and it was like, we're empowered by technology. What do we want to do? There's all that possibility, but then what is it that we want to do with it? And that's been a question for me. There's also Will Self is a guy I really love everything he says, and he always has this formulation. And he was saying recently that criticizing the constant yay saying to more of everything. Every Christmas, 1/3 of everything we buy is either goes to the landfill directly or sits in our houses unused, so consumerism is definitely something that was also really on my mind as I was approaching this idea of making a magazine, and some of the topics we would and the kind of ethos that we would have in the magazine. And then there's Nassim Taleb, who influenced the first issue. I discovered a talk about him that he made in 2010, and he talked about fragility, antifragility, robustness. He was just describing everything I was feeling. So he's been a great influence into validating that maybe I should do something about my ideas, because I could just relate so much to his thinking that I thought we had to do something about that. So there's the concept of unknown knowns as well, which is, you may remember Donald Rumsfeld, former U.S. Secretary of Defense, who said, there are known knowns, there's known unknowns, and then unknown unknowns. There's also unknown knowns, which are things that we know, but we'd rather not think about. And I think there's a lot of things like that in this world today, where we know there's something wrong, but human ignorance sometimes, we'd prefer to forget about it. And I just couldn't help myself and try to find a voice to talk about these things. So there's a number of things happening in the world right now. Our milieu is changing. I'll talk about 3 things very quickly. I knew time would be an issue, but well, I might, it's Canadian time, so it's always like 3 minutes more. This is a polar vortex. It made a lot of noise in the US last year. This is probably something that speaks to you very well. New colors had to be invented to describe a certain phenomenon. Ross mentioned the bees earlier, so this is also very of much concern. There's also population growth. So the second thing that I think is also a force that's influencing us in the crafting of these topics and our thinking is globalization, commodification. From toothbrush to chicken, everything is commoditized, and it's accelerating. Mega cities, larger cities. This is Lagos, Nigeria, which is now clocking in at 20 million people and growing. More people in the same places, especially closer to the shores, mean more room for events that might be very disruptive for a population, as we've seen with Hurricane Katrina. You've got, the London housing market is skyrocketing. People from Russia, China buying property, often not using it. If you go to New York, you see all those towers. Even in Toronto, there's no lights on ever. There's no one residing in there. So it's really changing as well the way we live in our cities when this massive influx of capital hits the market. The iPhone is made in about 20 countries from 100 different suppliers, and there's opacity. I mean, the horse meat scandal allowed us to understand a little bit how our food is produced. This is a map of all the flights in one day over Europe. Heathrow's in the middle. So that brings a lot of complexity as well. When SARS started, it started in Hong Kong. The next place it went is Toronto. So there's a nonlinear kind of reality that we have to face when we have all these people traveling. Everything is becoming computable and connected through the network. We'll be able to forge our own DNA. algorithms, self-driving cars, these things are happening. Computation power is really a strong force that accelerates this complexity. Robotics is changing as well the economy. Technology is woven into life, wearables. There's a lot of efficiency innovations from hotels, taxi, you think about Uber, you think about Airbnb, they're all disrupting the economy. Robots are also getting smarter and more agile. You've got social movements that are also, accelerated through social media. There's also surveillance. This is the headquarters of the NSA. And all that creates more contradictions and more complexity. And as we know, one of the cure to contradictions is innovation. And one of the reasons why innovation is such an important topic today is because we have all those contradictions coming from complexity, and we need to innovate and find new solutions to help frame some scenarios that relate to the movement of our systems. It's too bad that I couldn't let them go like that. It's nice pictures. So one thing that we're trying to, a consequence of that is the quest for authenticity, meaning, purpose, and solidity. So I think first comes purpose and then comes impact. The Alpine review has been really grounded in this idea of authenticity as well. And I think, we see it, like the whole coffee, third wave movement, and you see it everywhere. It's not just a hipster kind of thing. It's also because in the more complexity, the more we need to find solidity. I wanted to tell you a little bit about something. I started wanting to do this magazine. First thing is, I think you need to realize what you're not. I was really influenced by the maker movement, and before landing on deciding I would do a magazine, I said to myself, well, maybe I can make something. I wanted to make a product. I have here, I'm wearing a belt. It's probably the most expensive belt ever produced because it cost me about $3,000. It says Prototype 1 here. And I realized, after all this experiment, I thought I could make something really cool, and I found some guy who could help me and all that, tested all kinds of things. And I realized, you know what? I'm not the guy with the apron. I'm not the guy who's going to do that. So I abandoned and I said, well, I'm going to create a thought vehicle instead. So I traveled to Berlin. I wanted to, randomness, serendipity was really an idea that was strong for me. I thought to myself, the only way that I can make a magazine is getting out of my comfort zone and trying to test some ideas with some people. So I said, I'm going to go to the place that's probably the most progressive, Berlin, and I'm going to bounce some ideas with some guys, and we'll see whether they tell me that I should just stop because my ideas are not strong enough, or I should just proceed. And the feedback has been amazing. So the Berlin community has really been a big part of this magazine. And you need to find, when you make something, you need to find your community first. And then, you have the chance to potentially succeed. So we've been validating this project. I also wanted to, I didn't travel alone. I brought I wanted to have a new fresh set of eyes. I'm destabilized by the picture of my daughter. I'm really happy with this picture. I took it in Copenhagen, and I thought she was so cute. So we traveled as a family, and I was really. I thought it was important as well in exploring all those ideas, having become a father, to have my family with me, and it basically structured a lot of the thinking. It was really one of the happiest moments of my life, and I remember exactly at that coffee shop. You should go if you go to Copenhagen, to telling my wife, I'm really happy. And I said to myself, that's the first time I said that ever. And so it was great. The Barcelona Days came after the Berlin Days, and those were not as fun as the Berlin Days. It was basically, once the magazine was done, I spent a month in Barcelona. We've got a great relationship with our printer in Barcelona. But then it was the reality of this thought product was now a real physical product, which I had 6 tons of magazine waiting for me in Barcelona, no plan for distribution, absolutely no idea. I got there and I said to my printer, I need help because I have no idea I'm gonna, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to, my pleasure was to create the idea, create the product, but the physicality of it, I had to be reconciled with that, and it was really, really difficult. So it's been definitely the downfall for me. Spending these 30 days in Barcelona was miserable. So after all that, I came back to Canada, of course, and we sold the magazine, and it went well in the end. We've got, as I said, some great feedback. But Indy is Indy. I mean, it's really an independent kind of project. I had to go back to consulting. I had to go back to making money. By now, I had 2 kids. Things go fast when you're having fun. So I was back to a world of constraints. Like this project, the Alpine Review, had no constraints. The only constraint is I had to commit to a lot of money, but that was something that I was prepared to do. Now I was going back to consulting, the corporate world, and constraints, and it was awful. I mean, I was, I did a mandate for a bank, and I was literally physically nauseous. And I call them the Tim Hortons days, because we have a coffee chain in Canada called Tim Hortons. It's basically cheap coffee, and I was used to the Berlin super good coffee, and I could not drink that coffee anymore. I could only drink the cheap coffee. So to this day, I still drink Tim Hortons coffee. I think it's a kind of remedy now for me. So it's been a very difficult period going back to constraints and trying to mix as well. When you raise the bar and you do something only for yourself, then how do you go back to doing something that is influenced? The conclusion is basically in 2013 I had to say goodbye to my dad who passed away, and it's been a very difficult period. And I had my kids, and my dad left us, and I started asking myself, how will I measure my life? And I was thinking about these ideas of legacy, of reputation, and I thought, really, one thing that you can leave behind is your legacy and the stuff that you've been thinking about, and whether if you saw fraud, and were you able to call fraud? Were you able to stand up for your ideas? Were you able to try to understand how the world works? And it's really what I've been trying to do ever since, and that's really what inspires me to do the magazine and continue to promote these ideas. Thank you.